Welcome to the Kindred Journey Podcast, the podcast where women share their experiences of stepping into courage when comfort is no longer an option. This is the podcast for connecting in community with women who have been shaped by the liberating to challenging seasons that life endures. I am your host, Leslie. I am a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. I too have experienced these seasons in life, and I want you to know that you are surrounded by a community of courageous, real women here for you. I can't wait to connect, so grab your favorite beverage and join me on this kindred journey. Hey everyone, in this week's episode I sit down with Heidi Low and we talk about her seasons of courage. She talks about how all seasons of courage in her life have built upon one another, and that how she only makes choices that are in alignment with who she is, and talks about how she makes choices within those seasons and moments of courage, even when they aren't chosen, and how she's able to stay in true alignment with herself through those hard seasons of courage. We talk about it's in the being and not in the doing, and it's your choice how you perceive things and what you do with it. We also dig into perceived identity versus true identity. And the quicker you lean into something, the quicker you will be on the other side. This conversation is rich and so full of wonderful nuggets from Heidi and her life's experiences. And Heidi has helped bereaved parents re-identify their purpose through their grief, and hosting retreats and holding a space for these bereaved parents, which is such a beautiful thing. And now she is broadening her reach and helping anyone start retreats. So if a retreat is something that you have been curious about or interested in trying on for size, Heidi is actually offering a Create Your Retreat VIP day, and that's next Friday, April 5th. There is a link in the show notes to that. So if you're ever been on the fence or questioning or thinking a retreat would be fun, or how do I get started, or stuck on what to do next, I would highly recommend signing up for Heidi's course. She is an amazing human and has wonderful experience and has a lot of great takeaways. I've talked to her a couple times about what she does, and she's always leaving me wanting to ask more questions. So please join me in this week's episode of Seasons of Courage with Heidi Low. Good morning, Heidi. How are you?
Good morning, Leslie. I'm good. I'm still drinking my coffee.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
All cozy, I hope, because it is.
Yes.
It's chilly here.
Yeah, you're probably a little bit more chilly than we are, but I'm here in Portland and it's rainy and nice, cozy, stay inside weather.
Yes,
for sure.
cozy coffee drinking weather.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, thank you for joining me. And I know we've had a chance to connect before, and we were in the same course, so I've learned a little bit about you and your multiple seasons of courage. But maybe if you could tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and give a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, so I'm Heidi, and like you alluded to, I've had multiple seasons of courage, just like I think everybody does once you're at a certain age.
Yes.
And part of this, we were kind of talking about like what season of courage to talk about. And I guess as I'm thinking right now, I feel like they all build on one another. And maybe the most courageous thing I have done that I want to share is that once I've gotten down and had to exercise my courage and gone to another level, chosen to then go there again. So it's like once you've had to go through a season of courage and gotten to the other side of it, to make a choice to do that again is both easier because you know that you can do it, and also harder because you know how much work is in it. Mm-hmm. Like the first time. So like, just for frame of reference, a context, 20 years ago, my 5-year-old daughter died. And in the midst of her death, my marriage fell apart. And so like totally redesigning a life in the midst of a ton of loss. Mm-hmm. And in that one, that's the one that most people go to right away. And yes, I was absolutely 100% the hardest thing that I've ever done. There's no two ways about it. And I didn't know what I didn't know going into that one. And it was just a matter of survival. Like, you have to go have courage to come out the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in subsequent life changes where I've made conscious decisions where it wasn't necessarily something that was thrust upon me, but like I chose and knew that there would be hard work because I had to go through the hard work before. I feel like it's actually more of an act of courage. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense?
It does. No, I think you have a little bit of that experience and a little bit of that maybe confidence, like you going into a next season of courage, but still don't know how it's going to turn out. There's so much lack of control as well. But so it's kind of shaky ground, but also a familiar place or a familiar feeling at the same time.
Which gives you the confidence to know that you can get through it. So
Mm-hmm.
like I can say, so since Alison's death, like 10 years after she died, no, 9 years after she died, I made a choice to totally uproot my career and move almost 3,000 miles away and start fresh and new, to start doing retreats for other bereaved parents. And in that one, I would say that was the easiest, bold, courageous decision I made because it was completely forward thinking. It was completely something that was like resonating with my heart and soul. And it felt like it was in alignment with my daughter's memory and all of that kind of stuff. So that was an easy one because I knew that I could make hard choices and that I could go forward. But then with this newest one, just a couple of years ago, I chose to move back to Portland, Oregon, where I was born here in Portland. This is where all my family was. But I had not lived near family by choice for over 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved my life in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had totally established my life there. And so in making that courageous choice to live near family, because I just knew it was the right thing, but not necessarily what I wanted to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew how hard it could be to make changes and do all those things. It was a hard, courageous choice. It was a really hard one.
Would you say
And the
that
right one.
the right choice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So would you say that it was out of alignment with yourself because you said it was what you knew you needed to do, or was it, I mean, I guess maybe you could elaborate a little bit on your different seasons of courage with emotions that, like, it sounds like maybe your choice to move to Hawaii was liberating and maybe your choice to move to Portland was not as liberating, and obviously losing your daughter. So and going through a marriage that didn't that fell apart after your daughter's passing. Maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. So I would say it's definitely in alignment because I am at a place in my life. And I would say with the death of my daughter, this is one thing that I learned through that season, that I only make big choices when I know at my core they're in alignment with who I am and where I'm supposed to be. And this, I think that's what gives me the courage in the hard times, in whatever choice. So the move to Kauai, it like made my heart, like it was totally in alignment, and it also made my heart sing because it was something exciting. And I was I was starting a new endeavor that I was excited to be starting. I was moving to an amazing place. It was an adventure. It was like checking all the boxes of everything that I wanted and that my soul was craving. This move to Portland, yes, it's completely in alignment, but it's also difficult because I left an amazing life living in what people call paradise. I mean, it was still life. So like, I wasn't living a vacation life. I was living a regular life, but moving to do some hard things, to be in really close relationship with family again, which of course is always wonderful, but also complicated because families are families. And so it was completely in alignment and completely what I needed to be doing and what my soul and my heart were calling me to do, but also not always the fun, fluffy. I know it's hard to articulate it, but am I getting to what you were actually asking or not?
Yeah, no, I think that you just expressed the different feelings that arose with choices that you've made that were all courageous. And I love what you said about that you only make choices that are only in alignment with who you are. And that's how you know it's especially stemming from courage. I think that's probably one of the biggest foundations maybe to lean on when making big choices in courage is it in alignment with myself? Is this, I know some are forced, like your daughter's passing, that was a moment that you did not choose. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that season of your life, and share the feelings that came from that, or the how you navigated that a little bit.
Yeah. So that was obviously completely forced on me and not something I chose. And yet, how I chose to handle it, I got to choose to be in alignment with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think even in the choices that are thrust upon us, you can choose how you're going to deal with it. And there were definitely moments that I wasn't in alignment. I think that was the biggest, like refiner's fire, for lack of a better way of putting it, of growing into who I truly was. Like it stripped away everything that wasn't the core of who I was, and really getting into alignment. And I think that that's a choice that we always have to make when we're handed things that we don't like, that we aren't in control of. We are in control of how we perceive what happens to us and what we do with it. And that's where you can always 100% be in alignment, or choose to be in alignment, or even, I mean, at some point say, screw it, I don't care if I'm in alignment or not, I'm just effing miserable right now. And I definitely had those moments, which I don't think I've shared this on a podcast before, but I had one of those moments because, I went from wife and mom of a terminally ill child and 3 bonus children, stay at home. And I was taking one college course at a time, but so my whole identity was completely stripped from me. And now I was working full time, going to school full time, living in an apartment, lost a lot of my friends through all of it. And so rebuilding friends in a circle and all that kind of stuff. And there was one day where I was just like, I'm done. I've had it. Like, no, I'm not going to kill myself. Like, I can't do that. But how about I just starve myself? Like a passive way of just being done. So I had just gone to Costco like 2 days before, went through my kitchen and threw out everything. I was like, that's it. I'll just starve myself. And had that. So that, like, completely not in alignment with what my soul wants, clearly. But at that moment, I was just done throwing in the towel. And I don't remember, like, I really remember going through my kitchen and doing that. And I remember throwing away the dried cherries that I got at Costco that were really yummy. I threw it all away. And then, like, I don't remember the rest of the day, but then in the evening, some friends called and like, oh, we're going out to Chinese food. You want to go with? And I was like, yeah, I'm hungry. You bet.
that lasted as long as a child's tantrum. Like you got over it. Yeah.
And that's really what it was. It was like my soul's tired soul's tantrum. But then able to spring back in. And I bring up the Costco run and the dried cherries, because then I was really upset because I went back to Costco and they didn't have the cherries. And I was like,
oh shoot.
But that's where you can get out of alignment and get back into it.
And I think you need to, something I've learned is to remind yourself to give yourself the permission to have those shit days or those tantrums, or I'm just going to stomp around and be pissed off about my situation for 10 minutes. Then I'm going to go for a walk and reset. I think if you don't allow yourself to have those moments, that's when you either suppress or it builds and just kind of, throw it under the rug, a time over time. And then that's when it builds up, and then it might really implode one day. But I think also honoring those spaces of not being your most authentic aligned self, because we're all human and we all have them.
100%. And that's in working with bereaved parents, and all that I do, I am always about, you have got to feel it. It's in the avoiding of it that the pain actually really is at. It's you're so, or at least me, I was so afraid to go into it sometimes, thinking I wouldn't get out of it. But once I gave myself guardrails and said, okay, I'm just going to go deep for this amount of time. And I'm giving myself permission to do that. Once I would do that, I didn't even really need most of the time that I gave myself. Because it was like, once I actually, it was a lot less exhausting to just go into it and lean into it than to keep trying to create detours around it. And I carry that into my life now because, of course, I still go through hard things and have heartache and all that. And so once I stop fighting it and say, okay, well, let's just go with it.
That's
It feels
beautiful.
so freeing.
It does. Yeah, no, absolutely. And maybe you could share a little bit about, I've was, learned a little bit about you and when you started your retreats for bereaved parents, and maybe you could share a little bit about that process and parents needing to have maybe several years of grievance before even entering into the retreat, and maybe you could just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I over the span of like 8 years, I was very fortunate in that I had the resources to be able to um, find what I needed in my grieving process. I had some key people. Like I didn't have a huge network because I was very much and still am very much an internal processor. I'm not a support group girl. I'm not an external processor. So it's funny that I'm on podcast and doing a podcast, but it's because it's one-on-one conversations and it's like that deeper connection. And so I really realized that like I want to be able to provide all of these tools and richness and resources that I've been able to gather that have brought me to where I am for other parents. And it's not for every other parent because we're all different, but for the parents that are like me, that are internal processors, that want like a quiet space and be able to do this, I want to provide something for them. And so that's what precipitated my move to Hawaii, was to be able to provide retreats for other parents. And in that, as you mentioned, we get parents on the waiting list. There's like hundreds of parents on the waiting list, but we don't invite them to be part of a retreat until they're at least a couple years out from their loss. Because for me, my zone of genius when it came to grief was not in the acute grief stage of like that first 6 months, year dealing with that. It was like, I want to hand you a permission slip to start enjoying life again, to recognize that you can still experience joy, you're still living, and you still have purpose. So here, let's go figure out what it is. And honestly, in that first couple of years, you don't even realize it, but you're not ready for that. You need to be in that depth of grief. You need to be in that figuring out what life looks like without your child here with you. And so it's to be respectful of that space and that time and that process. And then when you're ready and get to that crossroads of what now, we're there for them at that point. And so, and I did that for 10 years and I'm still doing it. But after the first 5 years, because part of it is parents discovering what their purpose is, there's a lot of parents that say, I want to work with other parents. And so I really changed my role from being the facilitator of the retreats and the like everything of the retreats to training parents that were interested in it, doing like a 4-day retreat with them and teaching them leadership and how to run a retreat. And now they're the ones that are doing the retreats for the other parents. And now I'm segueing into teaching anybody that has, because there's so many people, whether it's grief or anything else, you've learned skills for your particular something and want to share them with other people. And so like now I'm empowering all folks to do what I did in their own little zone.
That is just so beautiful. I just commend you for taking what a tragic loss and just what you shared about parents wanting to flourish into becoming leaders themselves, and how many lives you've impacted for the greater good is such a beautiful thing, because and it all stemmed from unfortunately a tragic loss, but you turned it into something very beautiful, and helping these parents continue to heal, and then them wanting to help they found their passion or purpose in their grief or their loss, as well as and now, like you said, in your newest season of kind of opening that up to a broader spectrum, it's just really beautiful. I think it's I can't even imagine how many lives you've impacted, and that's such a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you. And I totally receive that. And when people talk about like say something like that, yes, totally receive it. And I also feel like anybody can do that
Mm.
because it's actually I feel like I'm more of a vessel. Like it's like I'm open to it and like the flow, source, whatever you want to call it. It's like I'm open to whatever I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm just directed and show up at the right place at the right time for the right people.
Mm. And do you recognize that as courage, or do you just see that as part of who you are?
I think it's a part of who I am, but I have to have courage to show up for it
Mm-hmm.
and courage to listen to it because it can be so much easier to get into the day-to-day grind and just do what you think you're supposed to do and watch what other people are doing and see their path and then follow that instead of like it takes a lot of courage to sit in the listening and following what is sometimes a whisper
Mm-hmm. And
versus falling behind somebody else.
what is that to you? I know it's different for everybody how they receive. I call them God nods. I'm of Christian faith, but
Mm-hmm.
how do you receive that? How do you how does that come to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question because um, it's in different ways. I feel like it's when it's I put it out there. It's kind of I don't know, a process of like putting it out there and then creating space for it because it's like if I put it out there of like a thought or like writing it down in a journal or like creating an intention, um then if I like so I write in my journal every morning what my intention is for the day, and then I kind of forget about it because like I do keep coming back to it, but if I'm like so laser focused on finding it and forcing it, it doesn't leave space and room. So it's more of like setting it, doing the homework, but then letting it go. And it's when I go on my walk in the middle of the day when I'm like in a clear space that all of a sudden it comes. Or all of a sudden I'm listening to a podcast and somebody mentions exactly what it was that
Mhm.
I had been thinking about. Or like I ask for a sign. And so it just, I'm sorry this answer is all over the place,
No, it's
but
great.
receiving it is kind of like all over the place.
Hmm.
And it's in that void and that quiet that it comes. It's in the being, not in the doing.
It's in the being and not in the doing. I love that. Yeah, I think everything that you just explained is so beautiful because sometimes either we aren't receiving isn't turned on, or
Mm-hmm.
we aren't able to receive, or we don't want to receive, or, I think receiving is there, I've been kind of exploring with this thought of receiving is courage lately as well. Like that takes
Mm-hmm.
courage to be able to receive, whether it's love or a sign or, influence or a podcast or what, but sometimes you could just be listening to a podcast and that is what it is. It's just a podcast. But if so, anyways, I just think opening to receive is also a form of courage. And that's a very beautiful way of all those little receiving ways, of how you take it in, I think is very beautiful.
Well, and I think 100% that it's about that it takes courage to receive, because in receiving you're not controlling.
Hmm.
When you're doing the output and the doing, you get to control it, or at least you get the illusion of control.
Right.
But in receiving, I guess you get your control is in choosing if you receive it or not. And when you're talking about sometimes, if you're open to receiving, what I would say is that there's like this stream of receiving that is always there. It's whether we tune into it or open the door for it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
always coming. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
do you choose to be in the flow of that?
Being in the choice of receiving.
Yeah.
That's where you have the control. I like what you said, when we were talking earlier, you have the control of how you want to show up for those seasons of courage or choosing to be in a light, that's where
Mhm.
your control is based. Maybe you can share a little bit about the harder seasons that weren't chosen, that you did not choose, and how you, maybe an instance or something, maybe where you decided to, let me think about how to word this, um, where you felt like you were in control in such a, I mean, I've been in seasons of courage. I guess maybe let me put it in my context first. I've been in seasons of courage where I was forced and not chosen.
Mhm.
And I just felt like I was spiraling. So I felt completely out of control. But maybe were there any grounding practices that you had in those seasons that were forced and not chosen, where you were able to kind of grasp a little bit of control and not I'm sure just feeling the chaos, I guess. Does that make sense
Mhm.
what I'm trying to, maybe you
Yeah.
can, okay.
Yes. I think it does. So for me, I always I made a pretty conscious decision very early on when my life completely blew up that this is not going to define me.
Mm.
I'm going to use this as something to refine me and to say that I can look back at this and it was hell, absolute hell. And yet I am more myself. I am a happier and better person, or more, I can't even say better person, but more expressed as who I truly am in this. And I kept going back to that when it would just get overwhelming and um, like I couldn't go any further. It was like, no, I'm using this. I am not a victim to this. This is not happening to me. It's happening for me, even though it's like the most horrendous thing that I think that can happen to a parent. It was the thing that was happening for me. And I'm making that choice to see how it can happen for me and how I can not be a victim to it.
I think that's wonderful. I mean, like you said, it's probably I couldn't imagine, I have a 18-month-old son, and um, hearing your story, I've gotten teary-eyed hearing your story. Um, it's like you said, it's probably one of the worst things that could happen to a parent, but it's not going to define who you are. And I think that's something that some people, there's a fork in the road where you can choose. And I think the people that choose to go down that dark path it's a long road. It's a hard road.
It is. And I have seen actually pretty recently, I've seen a really stark example of, I have somebody in my life that has has a particular story and has allowed that story to define their life, and then seen somebody else that has a very similar story but use that story to launch into something different, and to see the stark contrast of how those lives have been lived, um, was really eye-opening and amazing to see that it really is a choice of how you perceive things and what you do with it.
Mm.
And I have every right to have a pretty shitty life. Like, I'm entitled to that 100%. I just didn't want to.
Mhm.
I didn't want to use that excuse and that entitlement for that.
Do you ever think about, like, looking back on your life, like if you would have chosen that dark path? Have you ever thought, like, has your, like, out of curiosity, like, man, where would I be if I chose not to live a legacy for Allison and yourself? But uh, I don't know, like that's just something I
Yes, I
think about.
have. Yes, I have. And I don't do it often, but like once in a while, like I'll see something that reminds me of that time, and then I see it and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad.
Hmm.
Like, um, yeah, so happy. And of course, my life is not perfect and a bed of roses, and
Sure.
it had plenty of things, but I also look at, oh my gosh, the rich experiences and the relationships and the things and just all of it, that I wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean, of course, I would love to have Alison back and I would trade it to have her back, but I also don't think that, I think this has been a really huge part of me being able to move forward, is that I truly, and I know that not everybody believes this and it's totally fine, but for me, I really believe that Allison's path was to be here for 5 years, and that Allison's path and my path crossed the way that they were supposed to. And instead of saying I only had 5 years with her and I was cheated, I look and I say, oh, I had 5 years with her and she chose me as her mommy, and how blessed am I that I got that.
And that's such a beautiful place to hold her in your heart, with warm, vibrant light versus the negativity and the I mean, and like you said, it's not for everybody. And I meant to say this at the beginning. This is a sacred space for you to share your story. This is your time. So your story is honored and respected. So please speak freely and be as vulnerable as you'd like. So yeah, I think another thing I was just thinking about in our conversation is some of the couples that have come into your retreats. Have you seen any, like, does anything stick out that's like a mass transformation, like from the beginning of the retreat, or maybe one of the parents was, like you said, maybe even two parents have taken the dark road and the lightened road, in bereaving a child. And maybe you could share some, like an instance like that.
I would say that, yes, I see so many transformations over the years. And oftentimes it's with the people, like, couple things. The people that are sometimes the hardest during the retreat have the biggest transformation afterwards, because there's such, I think there's such an inner struggle that's going on that it presents itself during the retreat, and then they get home and they process it, and then you just, like, you see what they have to say afterwards, and you're like, oh my gosh, wow, were we at the same retreat? So yeah, see that. But then to your point about couples, and where I see it, like, more like the common theme is that a lot of times it's the external processor that applies to be at the retreat. The internal processor comes along. And yes, I would say more than 50% of the time it's the mom that applies and is the external processor, but not all the time. It has definitely been roles reversed. So that's not across the board. But the bigger transformation is for that internal processor that comes and has the space and the time to be able to dig deep into it in a way that's safe for them, because we have a container that you don't have to do it externally. You can feel safe in going into it. And with that, most of them actually do open up and share, because it's a smaller group. It's a safe group of people that have gone through something similar. And that's where I've seen amazing, tremendous life change over the long haul. And then also that permission slip, like, you're in a safe space to acknowledge that you want to continue to live life. Because so often for parents, there's this weird tension of the generalized other wants you to both be better and fixed and not create uncomfortableness by still grieving your child or talking about your child. But then they also, if you're not in looking like you're in grief and you're laughing and you're having a good time and you're living life, well, didn't you love your child? Like, so you cannot win.
Right.
You cannot. And so to be in a space where, like, it's okay to have the to want to talk about your deceased child just like everybody else talks about their living child, because they're just as much a part of your life. And you can laugh and play and have fun and want to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I'm sure there are narratives out there of what you should be doing as a bereaved parent, and like the examples that you just shared. And maybe you could touch light on, is there any advice or words of encouragement for the people on the outside looking in, for the parents that have lost a child?
Absolutely. Number one, there is nothing that you can say or do that is going to be that aha moment. So don't think that, like, take the pressure off yourself. And this is going to sound weird, but take the pressure off yourself to be the savior of in any way. What you can do is provide a safe space. And all you need to do is say, I'm here. I'm here to hold it. Share what you want. Don't share what you don't want. I would love to hear stories if you want to share them. I would love to hear you talk about your child if you want to talk about your child. And if you don't, I don't think any less of you either.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think any less of your relationship with your child. I'm just here for you. So I had a couple that I went to their house every single Sunday night for a couple of years. And it was just having that standing date. I think that's something that you can do, is like a standing coffee date or whatever. And it doesn't have to be every week, but like, just so that you know that you have this time that you can go and just be in an ongoing relationship. And sometimes you talk about the kids, sometimes you don't. Like, just follow the lead of the bereaved person, and just be there.
I think that's very beautiful. And just to have that space, you don't even have to talk. You can just sit there and have coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to have a sacred, a safe space to go to and to be felt welcome. And I think that's just to show up for them is all you can do.
Yeah. And it does become sacred. You started to say sacred before you said safe. And
Mm-hmm.
it is sacred
Mm-hmm.
because you're allowing a person to just be them in the entirety of who they are.
And something that you said, I won't think any less of you if you don't talk about your child. I won't think any less of you, or your relationship with your child. So I think, yeah, that does become sacred when you can just show up in your full authentic self and not need to have any expectations tied to that moment.
Yeah. And I think this goes for anybody, whether you're in grief or not, or whatever. Just as humans, we need to be acknowledged and seen as not a one-trick pony or hitting one note.
Mm-hmm.
We are all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And to be accepted in all of the things.
We're such complex. All of it, each individual person is their own complex being. It's a beautiful thing, but it's a wild thing at the same time.
Yeah. Well, it's so easy for us to like want to categorize people because it's easier for us and more comfortable for us of like, oh, that's the happy one, that's the moody one, that's the one that shows up, that's the one that never does. It makes it easier for us, but that's not who we are as people.
Speaking of categorizing people, and something that you said earlier that resonated with me was that you pretty much had your entire identity stripped away from you as a wife and a mother in your really hard seasons of courage about 20 years ago. Maybe you could kind of just express how maybe your identity has shifted over the years through seasons of courage, and maybe stripping down the narrative of identity. I'm a wife and a mom, and I get it. We kind of like to, as humans, fix to these labels of, when somebody starts dating somebody new, one of your friends, you're like, oh, well, what do they do? Like, that's probably one of the first questions that you just naturally ask. So it's something that kind of ties, but it's not our identity. It's not our identity to the core. So maybe could you talk about identity a little bit and shifting and growing through these seasons of courage?
Yeah. So, and it's a great question. I love it because, what I used to say that like I'm growing and changing and becoming and all of those things. And what I've come to realize is a stripping down of all of the externals and actually just stepping into who you truly are at your soul level. So it's not my identity, my perceived identity is different, but my true identity is actually just more expressed and more who I actually am. And yes, so I am single, and so like in the dating world, and have been I've been in relationships, but like in different places in my life, been in that where it drives me crazy because it's like, it's not about what you do. And it's not even about like, yes, you need to know how many kids they have and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, yeah, you're a father, but who are you? Who are you underneath being a father? Like, what informs how you're a father?
Right.
And I think that identity is, and even in the like, so I don't, and this is one thing I love about Hawaii is like, people there, they don't ask what you do. They don't lead with that. Like, it's more about getting to know you. And it's also like, oh, what do you like to do? Or do you surf? Or do like, but that's still like expressions of who you are. Like, that you love the outdoors, or like, it's hard to really get it, like who the identity is, but it's like the soul of who you are, like what lights you, what genuinely lights you up. and more than that, like, what is it about that thing that lights you up?
Mm. Yeah, I think that's something to process.
I know it's a
'Cause
hard one.
it's a hard question, right? And like, even
Yeah.
like, oh, what's your purpose? It's like, oh, I don't know. Some days I don't know. Some days it's more clearer than others. And some days I think it's something that constantly evolves.
It evolves and changes.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I would hate for somebody to peg, like, for a while, my purpose for a while was to be serving other bereaved parents. But that's
Mhm.
not my life's purpose.
Right.
Like, I'm at the point where I feel like if you're going to have one particular life purpose, for me, it's like to be happy,
Mhm.
to be genuinely happy, to have pleasure and play in my life. And like the external things that bring that can change, but at the core, it's like to live life fully.
Yeah. Well, and I think you've led a good example of that. Like I said, I commend you for the choices that you have made in your life that have led such a beautiful life. I think it is very beautiful. I think you exuberate happiness in ways, um, and maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing some things, I see you for the beautiful person you are, and the courage that you kind of just, I don't know if you just receive it or you it just seems to come so natural to like, yeah, this is going to be hard, but I'm going to, process it and make sure I'm in alignment. It just
Mhm.
seems like some people step into courage and, they're driving at the driver, holding onto the wheel and
White
not,
knuckling.
yeah, white knuckling like into the courage. Like, I don't know where I'm going, but I don't know. You just have this poise about you. So maybe would you mind sharing a few things that make up your identity that come to mind?
Yeah. So this is one that I have actually come to really, it's always been there. I think that's a part of identity is where once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then you see the through line throughout your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing for me is water.
Mm-hmm.
I I am alive with the water. So um, what that means for me is once I lived in Kauai and I was on the water, in the water, by the water every single day in the ocean. I was like, oh my gosh, this is where I am alive. This is where I'm creative. This is where, like, when I want to like work on a new curriculum, I go down and sit at my favorite beach and look out at the ocean and come up with it. When I've had a rough day and I just want to wash it all away, I put on my snorkel gear and go snorkeling at my favorite reef spot. The water was it. And then I looked back and I was like, oh my gosh, every place I've lived except for Idaho has been near water. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I moved to Portland, when I first moved here, I lived in like a friend's, like, or a family member's ADU until I could find something. And it was fine. But then I found my place that's right next to the river and I can see the river from my living room. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm home. Life's going to
Mm.
be okay.
Just
So that's
that
part of my identity.
that's beautiful. And very tranquil. That just seems so calming for you. And I love the picture that you have in the background too with
Okay, look
the
at that.
ocean waves, water.
Yeah.
Mine is mountains, so mountains and forest and trees. So Heidi, thank you so much for sharing that. I think everything there's just so many beautiful nuggets in everything that you shared, and I appreciate you and what you're doing. And uh, looking forward, what do you maybe, I mean, I know there's no control in the future, but we like to think we have a little bit. What do you see moving forward? Maybe some seasons of courage, or are you stepping into anything new or exploring anything that might feel in alignment, but liberating, or maybe scary at the same time?
Yeah, actually. So as I kind of alluded to earlier, I'm shifting from, I'm still going to be on the board of my nonprofit and like involved, but I'm really shifting for my daily um, energy and focus is on helping people that of any kind that want to start retreats. And that has been a huge jump because I've been doing something that I'm good at for 10 years. And like,
Mhm.
I know that I'm good at it. I know I can like make a living doing it. And I know that it's like giving back, but I also knew it was no longer in alignment for me. And I know that this is in alignment and it totally lights me up. Like the thought of going and like handing other people a toolbox, they can go empower people. I'm empowering people to go now empower more people that I can't touch because I don't have the special sauce that they do. And I don't have the resonance with certain people, but I can give them the things. Super exciting, 100% in alignment. And it's also scary because, okay, I'm going into a new business model. I'm going into reaching people that are not already in my sphere. I know how to do what I'm delivering, but I don't know how to get out there to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I don't know if it's going to like reach all the people it needs to. Actually, I do know that because that's where I do trust. At the end of the day, it's like, okay, I know I'm 100% in alignment, so I know it's going to reach the people, but it has taken a lot of courage. And it actually took me 2 years from like the first niggling in the back of my head of like, I know that I'm kind of, this season is over.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 2 years to get from that first thought to like, okay, I'm doing it, game on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm super excited about that now, and actually going to be doing my first like VIP day in January where I'm going to do it just for 10 people of like, okay, let's sit down and let's do it.
Awesome.
I'm looking so forward to that and then seeing what's next. But yeah, it does take courage.
Well, I'm super excited for you. I know I have inquired to you maybe about some retreats down the road, and so I'm excited for you to touch that many more people. And like what a humbling thing, admitting that, okay, I'm not everybody's niche, but I can teach these people the secret sauce to go teach their own niche. So I think, you were specialized in bereavement for 10 years and now you're kind of expanding. So I think just kind of infiltrating yourself throughout other people and connecting them and having them expand to their niches, I think is a beautiful thing. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And I'm so excited for what the future has to unfold for you. Wrap up question, hindsight 2020. I know we talked about multiple seasons and multiple layers of courage for you. Was there a pattern or anything in each season of courage that you would have told your old self or yourself at the beginning of each moment or season of courage, that knowing what you know now?
That's a really good question. The quicker you lean into it, the quicker you'll be on the other side.
I like that. Because then there's this whole thing called resistance.
Like just let go. That'd be the other thing, not just do it. Because sometimes we do it and we're not actually in alignment. We're doing it to plow through something. It's been more the just let go and trust. It's harder for me. Because like once I'm in alignment, I do. Like I have no problem doing, because it isn't all like, it's that weird give and take of like, give a little, go a little. So it's not just sitting back and allowing everything to happen. It's allowing yourself to know the direction and then taking inspired action.
I like that, taking inspired action. Awesome. Well, Heidi, could you share with our listeners where they could find you if they'd love to reach out to you?
Sure. Yeah. So you can find me at my website, my name, Heidi Low, HeidiLow.com. And I'm on Instagram at Heidi Christina Low, CH for the Christina. Those are probably the best two places. And if you're interested in doing retreats or like have even like thought about it, because I've talked to a lot of people, they're like, yeah, I thought about doing one, but I can't do it. On my website, I have a little button that you can push and it like just walks you through like envisioning what your ideal retreat would look like, just to get clarity on that and see if you actually do have an idea in your head. So
awesome. Well, thank you again, Heidi. And I can't wait for this to be launched and shared with the world. So
thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me and listening to the Kindred Journey Podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please consider taking the time to rate and review the podcast and share this episode with family and friends who you think might enjoy it. Your positive feedback helps me reach more courageous women like you. This is my passion project, so without you, I wouldn't be here doing this, and I deeply appreciate your support. Until next time.